It's now 6 o'clock. Keep on top. Okay. Hopefully everybody can hear me all right. Thank you so much for joining me today. I am coming at you from Los Suceros Historic Site, and today we are talking about a project that I did for my master's project at Coronado Historic Site. So let's jump right in, shall we? Okay, so this is the first lecture of the new season of Mesa Talks. So this is a lecture series that is brought to you by Los Suceros Historic Site, where I work, and brought to you by Mesa Prieta Petroglyph Project. So we did this tandem lecture series, and this is the first one of the season, so make sure that you check out the rest of them. So this one is given by me, Carlin Stewart. I am the instructional coordinator and archaeologist at Los Suceros Historic Site. A little bit about me, and I'll be moving around this little box a little bit so that you can see things better, so just be aware of that. I also will be taking questions at the end of the presentation. So if you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the comments and I will get to them. If you are watching this not live and at a later date, I will reply to you via comment. So I'll make sure I get to your questions. Again, thank you so much for joining. So my background is I have a BA in anthropology, a Bachelor of Arts, a focus in archaeology, and a minor in geosciences from the University of Arizona. And recently, as of December, I got my master's in public archaeology from the University of New Mexico. I have worked as an archaeologist in the Forest Service, Park Service, a nonprofit called Archaeology Southwest. I've worked in cultural resources management, which is like the private sector of archaeology. I have worked at University of New Mexico, UNM, at Los Alamos Laboratories, LANL, and now at New Mexico Historic Sites. So that's just a little bit about my background, so you know where I'm coming from and my perspective. And I know this lecture is going to be given to some archaeologists and a lot of non-archaeologists, so I'll make sure, you know, to explain things as I go. But again, if you have questions, I'll answer them at the end. So I want to start off this talk by saying that archaeologists are stewards of cultural heritage. And so it is our responsibility to educate and engage the public about archaeology and demonstrate how it is relevant in the world today. That is a really important factor. We have to demonstrate why it is relevant today. And so that is so important, this public education and outreach that is actually listed under the Society for American Archaeology's ethic list. So here you can see stewardship, accountability, and number 4 there is public education and outreach. So it is an ethic that we share knowledge, that, you know, we engage the public and do outreach and education about archaeology. And that is really where I'm coming from, is the importance of doing that. And so why is that so important? Well, if you take a look at this picture here, what I did, it was at a poster at the SAA, Society for American Archaeology conference in Albuquerque, New Mexico. I asked people how many times they have been asked about dinosaurs. Now, this conference is mostly, almost, I would say probably 90% actual like archaeologists. And so I'm asking a group of archaeologists how many times they have been asked about dinosaurs. Now, some of these might be a little facetious, you know, 100, 1,000, 375. They might not be, though. You know, a lot of those people are Montana, so I bet you get asked about dinosaurs a lot. And I asked where they're from. And so just that fact that we get asked so many times about dinosaurs suggests that there might be some kind of disconnect, because, spoiler alert, archaeologists don't dig dinosaurs. That is not our job. That is what paleontologists do. And so the fact that so many people of the general public think that's what we do as archaeologists really just demonstrates that we need to do better about education, better about outreach, so that we're not confusing those things. And so there are many ways that archaeologists are addressing this issue. And it is important not only to teach about archaeology, but use archaeology to teach. We want to bring archaeology to the public. And some things that already exist are citizen science programs, volunteer excavations. They do happen all over the country. Crow Canyon, for instance, the dig projects, which is what I will be focusing on today. Hands-on archaeology classes, where I used to work at Archaeology Southwest. You get to experience things hands-on. Volunteer artifact analysis groups. So the Friends of Coronado have a group that analyze ceramics, and like this one, and they could do a lot better than I ever could. Ceramics is not my forte, and so these volunteers just really are amazing with that. Rock art documentation. So our partner for this lecture series, Mesa, a lot of volunteers are able to do rock art demonstration documentations, and so they're out there doing that work. And then site stewardship programs where people help take care of and protect archaeological sites, for instance, Site Watch. So when it comes to archaeological projects and projects with the public, you might be thinking, are there different goals? Do these can these things be attained by using volunteers, by using the public? For instance, time and budget constraints. I've been on so many projects where it's like, go, 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 gotta get it done, gotta meet our deadlines, gotta hike, whatever, 10 miles in one day to get this done. Budget constraints, that's a huge issue too, because when you do take on volunteers, when you do a volunteer-based program, there is a learning curve. There is the time needed to teach. But we'll talk about that, if that's really so different, and how that can kind of balance out at the end. Then we have site protection and cultural sensitivity. So when we are educating the general public, there are still things that need to be protected. Site locations, for instance, it's very, very common that you give a site location and then bad things happen, looting, damaging petroglyphs, which we have seen in the news recently, which is horrible. And so we have to be careful still while using volunteers in really explaining the importance, the cultural importance of these places so that they remain protected. Also, cultural sensitivity. A lot of different groups have specific things they don't want talked about, don't want photographed, anything like that. And you have to attend to that. You have to pay attention to that and make sure that you are being sensitive. And then archaeological standards. Can the standards we set in academia or as professional archaeologists be met by using volunteers? And you'll kind of see how this all plays out with this project, which leads me to my goal of this whole project, or my thesis statement for my master's, was really discussing the effectiveness of Dig Historia, this project, which was a public archaeological project in which volunteers and graduate students worked together to not only excavate, but they got to survey, analyze artifacts, do the work in the lab, do the paperwork from Coronado Historic Site. And so I used this project as a case study to explore whether public archaeology projects can safely contribute valid archaeological knowledge while also engaging and educating the public. So that's really my goal, is to see, can these two things really go together well? So we are going to now talk a little bit about what is public archaeology exactly, and what are the dig projects? So public archaeology is really, that term refers to a lot of different things. It can refer to cultural resources management projects that focus on compliance. So it really focuses on the laws. There's a lot of construction projects, that type of deal. It could be archaeology by the public, so amateur interest groups, archaeological education, which could be outreach and engagement and public events, school visitations, field trips, popular archaeology, so shows like Time Team, if you've ever heard of that. And then, interpretation in museum displays or special events. That's really, meeting the public. That is public archaeology. And then you have archaeologists working with communities in a collaborative project. I would personally call that community archaeology. There's a little bit of a difference there, but it has been referred to as public archaeology before. And so this photo there on the right really shows you what that term can refer to, which is a lot of things. And so the definition that I like to use best is practice and scholarship where archaeology meets the world. And so that's really general, right? It's really just wherever archaeology can meet everything else, because we are not in an isolated bubble. The things that archaeologists do affect living people today. And so the goal really of public archaeology, in my mind, is to make archaeology accessible to the public in engaging ways that inspire meaningful connections to people and places of the past. So it's really about creating those connections so people don't think that we dig dinosaurs because they had an experience that showed them that archaeology has to do with people. So that's really the goal here. Now, why? What are the benefits of public archaeological projects? So one is being a little selfish here as archaeologist for archaeology, is really that education, that inspiration, those connections lead people to perhaps vote differently, donate money, advocate for archaeology and archaeological sites, protect those sites, report damage, report looting, that kind of thing, really care about it. But, you know, it's not just what people can do for us, that's not fair, but what can archaeology give to people? And really, you know, some of those important things are enrichment, reflection, creativity. I've had people say, you know, that being on these excavations is something they will never forget. It is a memory that they made with friends or with family that really will stick with them. And it's those moments that are just really amazing. And so the benefits is really addressing that disconnect between what it is we do as archaeologists and what the public believes we do, right? So we also address transparency. In archaeology, there has been a really big issue with being transparent. We use esoteric language, so language that's not really understood or acceptable or accessible, perhaps terms that are very academic or you wouldn't know what that means if you weren't taught, you know, in school. And so we want to make sure that we're using language that is accessible. Then there's this paternalistic protection of data. It's like, it's my project, nobody else can know about it. And that's not okay either. And so this kind of issue of not being open about what we are doing, paired with how we are misrepresented in the media, kind of leads to that disconnect. If people only see Tomb Raider, Indiana Jones, whatever, and don't know what it is we actually do, that's a problem. And so it creates that barrier. And it brings up all kinds of issues of ownership, who owns this information, authority, and exemplifies the persistence of colonialism within our discipline. And so public archaeology really tries to address some of those things. And that brings us to the DIG projects. So the DIG projects began at Coronado Historic Site in 2017 with DIG Kawawa. It won an award, the Leadership in History Award. DIG Gisawa at Mesa Historic Site in 2019, and then that also won an award. And then DIG Historia at Coronado Historic Site, which is my project, which I'm talking about. And so the goals of these projects are to not only gain information about the excavation itself, learn from the artifacts, learn more about the places and people in that area, but also to develop relationships with stakeholders, involve the public in these projects, and engage visitors that are just passing through at the same time. So pretty lofty goals, right? And so I started with the DIG projects at DIG Gisawa, which is at Mesa Historic Site, and we were excavating one room of the Pueblo there. This was an incredible, unique project in which we were working with the Mesa Pueblo in tandem to learn more about this Pueblo at Mesa Historic Site. And so that's where I jumped in. I was just a crew member for the first part of it, and then was kind of the crew chief and led the end of the excavation. And after that, I was like, I need a master's project. So thus Dig Historia was born, and I got to continue this legacy of projects here. And so Dig Historia happened at Coronado Historic Site, which I know many of you viewers have probably been to. It's really accessible, close to Albuquerque, right there in Bernalillo. And so background information on Coronado Historic Site. You guys, I'm about to cover like hundreds and hundreds of years, thousands of years in one slide. And so I really recommend learning more on your own, visiting Coronado Historic Site, using their resources, liking their Facebook page and following to learn more, because this is not going to do it. And it deserves so much more time and attention than what we have. But just so you have a little bit of background knowledge going into this project, Coronado, that area, the indigenous occupation started in the Archaic period, so really, really long time ago. There was hunting and gathering. As time moved forward, there were developmental pit structures. Farming took place. It's right on the river. It's a great place for farming. And this was the Tiwa-speaking population, which is ancestral to the modern-day pueblos of Isleta, Isleta del Sur, and Sandia. Next, going forward in time again, Kuwawa, the Pueblo of Kuwawa was constructed and occupied in AD 1300 to 1600. It was attacked by the Coronado expedition, which they do have evidence now that there was a battle there. So check out that information. It's very interesting. And then in 1598, Oñate established haciendas, including one that is south. And 1680, Pueblo Revolt occurs. Bernalillo was established in the Spanish Reconquest of 1693. Moving forward in time, logging became a huge part of the industry here. And thus, relating to this project, the Santa Fe Northwestern Railway was constructed between 1922 and 1923. And this crosses over the site, which we will be focusing on, 50230. This railway ran until 1941, where the trestle was damaged by flooding and never rebuilt. Now I'm about to show you a picture of this trestle, and just saying that one flood ruined this whole thing is bonkers, because it is huge. And so here in this map, you can just kind of see the railroad that would have crossed the Rio Grande. And so here is the picture of the trestle here. That the railroad would drive over, and it is massive. And so just imagine one flood taking out that whole thing. And it was so expensive, they never rebuilt it. Then, of course, the war started, and they needed all the metal from the railroad itself to help in war efforts. So really, it was never rebuilt. But there is still a berm that can be seen today, still part of that huge bridge on the other side of the river. And so this was our starting point. So our starting point was an archaeologist named David Snow suggested in a report in 1976 that a small undesignated site several hundred yards north of Kuwawa, which has been cut by the old railroad grade, which crossed the river, might have belonged to a settler named Diego Montoya before the revolt, or to his parents. And that's it. That is all the information that we have since the 70s on this site. And so this was a really awesome opportunity to start really from the beginning and learning more about this site. So again, why choose this one? One, we were able to study multiple occupations and time periods, which is a great opportunity for people to see the difference between what we classify as prehistoric archaeology versus historic archaeology, and see those levels change in the ground. It's located along a backcountry trail, which encourages visitor engagement. So visitors would be walking along the trail, they would see us excavate, be like, hey, what are you guys doing? And then more people are reached, more people are talked to, engaged, excited, especially kids when they're out there and they can pick things out of the screen. You get them excited, and you know that memory really sticks forever. It's like, oh, I remember picking artifacts out of the screen, not dinosaur bones, right? So there was also an upcoming overhaul of the trail system, and this is really important too. and why the site was chosen and why excavation was pursued is because if the trail system is going through, you need a good idea of what's out there as to not damage it. So also, it was minimally studied with conflicting information. And so that, again, allowed us to start at the very beginning of the process and go through the whole thing. Now, what do I mean about conflicting information? Well, for one thing, if you can see my little GIF there, the site was on the wrong side of the river. In the database that we use as archaeologists, the location of it was completely wrong. So in this map, you can see the blue is the river and it shows on the east side, which is not correct. So obviously we need to go back out there, see what's out there, and make sure we get updated spatial information to put it on the correct side of that river. I love the movie The Mummy, so there we go. Now, who's involved? All right, so first of all, this project would not have happened without the approval and support of Matthew Barber, who is the manager of Jemez and Coronado Historic Sites. I kind of acted as field director. I was out in the field every day telling people what to do or helping them or letting them do things. Abby Judkins, Cassandra Keys, and Joshua Vallejos were all in my cohort at UNM, and they were spectacular crew chiefs. They helped me every step of the way. And then who was the crew? The crew was all made up of Friends of Coronado members. So that was over 30 people in and out of this project, helping in different parts of it. And many were a part of previous dig projects. And that's a huge thing too, is like if, you know, it shows kind of the success of these things if people come back and want to do more. We also had undergraduate UNM students wanting to get more experience and some new faces. And so this excavation, only ran Friday through Sunday in October and November of 2019. So it was very short, and we managed to accomplish a lot in a short time. And on the right here, you can just see like some of those crazy schedules. We had a Dropbox for people to get photos and information. I made a handbook that covered a lot of things, which we'll talk about in a bit. So the original plan here was to see if a hacienda really could be identified underneath that railroad embankment. And was there enough data potential? Was there enough artifacts or anything that we studied to establish a recommendation to the National Register of Historic Places? And so there are certain criteria that you're supposed to meet in order to make that recommendation. So we wanted to see if that was possible. And if there was a hacienda there, could we see any interactions between the inhabitants of Chihuahua and the inhabitants of the hacienda? And I am fully aware of the ridiculousness of this map, and it very much looks like a little guy dancing. So at least as the project changed, the map did as well, because that's pretty ridiculous, and I totally understand that. So how did it change? Well, turns out that we couldn't get the excavation permit because you need a full survey report to have been published in order to do that. And so we had to do everything under a survey permit, which is minimal testing and a different concentration than we would have liked. Because in this past slide, the line there represents a trench. We wanted to dig a trench to really get a good profile of that stratigraphy. So we wanted to see what it looked like on the inside of the wall if we could see any of those layers. The other little eyeballs of this guy were individual units. So when I refer to a unit, it's usually a 1x1 square that we place in the ground to see what's below the surface. And so we couldn't do that anymore. And so, you know, really, I think these volunteers got a true taste of archaeology and how quick things can change. So our new goals became to just survey the area, the entire site, to establish site boundaries, see how big it was, and explore if there were subsurface deposits. So under a survey permit, you still can excavate, but in very, very small amounts. It's based on the percentage of the area of the site, and the size is a lot smaller. And so this still offered us a lot of opportunities to learn, to train, to get, you know, our hands dirty, which brings us to methods. How did we do this? So the methods that I am going to be discussing with you, one are the actual archaeological methods. So what did we do on the ground? And two, what were some methods of working with the public? That's a really important part too, and that's something that I wanted my paper to really focus on, was that human aspect, or the aspect of working with the public or working with volunteers. And so we're going to cover these different topics: volunteer training, mapping, survey strategy. I can speak. Survey strategies, site boundaries, infield artifact analysis, excavation, documentation, lab. That's a lot of stuff. So even just looking at this list, you guys can begin to understand that there's so much more to archaeology than just digging. And in fact, one thing I wanted people to take away from this project is that digging is not the most important way to gain information, and it's rarely used these days. We focus a lot more on survey. We have technology that can help us, LiDAR, that can see below the surface, that kind of thing. And so excavation is used pretty minimally, at least in my career. And I wanted people to gain that understanding, because again, we're just addressing those things that people think about archaeologists. So to begin, we'll talk about volunteer training. And so I kind of went back and forth. I was like, a lot of these people have been on excavations, whether a dig project or somewhere out in Alaska, like that kind of thing. And I was like, I came to the consensus that no, you need to have an orientation regardless of people's experience. I think that is critical, because not only do you learn about the specific site or the person leading it, everybody has different methodologies, but I also wanted to include things that maybe they didn't know, maybe other people didn't take the time to explain. Relevant laws. We need to know about NAGPRA and Historic Preservation Act and all of those things. I wanted to discuss terminology. There's a lot of terminology that was once used in archaeology that is no longer accepted or appropriate or just has changed. And, just talking about basic definitions, like, some people wouldn't know that when it comes to ceramics, we say sherd and not shard, because shard is, referred to like a piece of glass, but ceramics we call sherds. And so just going over stuff like that was really important to me. But also talking about the history of archaeology as a discipline itself, talking about this colonial problems, the problems of racism, how it has been used to damage people, and really show where we want archaeology to go. How can we use archaeology to benefit living people today? All of those things I thought were really critical to talk about. Other than just kind of sending people off to go dig without them understanding why or the weight of what they're doing. And so then I wanted to include the volunteers in all aspects of the archaeological process. This was a really unique part of this project, is they didn't just get to excavate or dig, which a lot of projects kind of just jump you in there, but they got to survey. They got to analyze artifacts in the field. They got to help, photograph and clean artifacts, do the research afterwards, that kind of stuff. So they got to really see the full process there. Again, giving them that idea that archaeology is more than just digging. It also helped, because I'll talk about this a bit later, but it also helped give the idea that if people just skip right to digging, i.e. looting, that you lose so much data in that. You lose so much information, you lose so much cultural significance, importance has been damaged. Like, there's just so many problems with that. And so if people got to experience like how much goes into an actual excavation, maybe people will be less likely to just do it on their own, haphazardly. That was my goal, at least. So mapping, we used GPSs like these ones right here to record the units that we dug into, the excavation units. Artifacts were recorded, as well as site boundaries. I thought it was important to teach people how to read maps. A lot of people haven't gotten that experience, especially these days with Google Maps and all that kind of stuff. So how to read a physical map, aerial photographs, how to use the GPS. These skills can transfer to other parts of their lives, right? Survey. So for the non-archaeologists tuning in, surveying is when we really just line up and walk. which I will show you the photo here. So here is during the project, this survey. So we all spaced out 5 meters apart, and we alternated between the graduate students who had field experience and the brand new volunteers that haven't surveyed before. And so that was really used when I was an intern just learning how to survey, because I would be surrounded by 2 crew chiefs in case I was like, hey, what's this thing? Someone could just jump over and be like, that's a rock, Carly, put it down. So that was really good. People could kind of bounce back and forth and not really miss anything, ask questions, that kind of thing. We recorded all of the artifacts that we found on the surface. In many cases, we took pictures, and we collected diagnostics. And so diagnostics are artifacts that could tell us something specific about a time, a person, a place. You know, so if it's like a watermark on the bottom of the bottle, that type of deal. And that could give us a date, that could give us a manufacturer, that kind of thing. And so we would collect those and assign it an FS number, a field specimen number, and that would be collected for later research. Moving on to site boundaries and in-field artifact analysis. And so we used many different flag colors, but the blues were always historics. And historics are, again, the artifacts that come from the railroad occupation, the railroad time. So it's like, you know, metal cans, glass, that type of thing. And so to do in-field artifact analysis, we divided into groups based on grad student specialties. And so I wanted to make sure that as you're walking, as you're surveying, as you're looking at artifacts, you knew what to look for. It's very easy to confuse a rock and a lithic that is actually a stone tool or a piece of a piece of something that became a tool, and be able to recognize specific aspects of it that set it apart. And so I wanted to make sure all the volunteers could do that, could recognize that on the surface. And so we broke it into grad school specialties. You know, some people are better at ceramics, lithics, or the stone, animal bones, which is called zooarchaeology. And so they got to really get an in-depth look at that. And not only did it benefit the volunteers, but these graduate students had an opportunity to share something that they studied and that they loved in a way that's accessible. Again, breaking down the words that we use, breaking down the processes. And this is not to say that the public is stupid or dumb by any means. This is really just breaking things down in a way that people can understand it, which benefits everybody. People are so smart, and we'll talk about what the volunteers bring to the project as well. And so, this didn't take too long. People were easy. They could pick it up. It's you can recognize things on the surface. We learned how to use GPSs and recorded all the artifacts. Excavation. Here's the kicker. So like I said earlier, we normally under an excavation, you typically do 1 meter by 1 meter units. Archaeology is weird. We use the metric system, I guess America is weird and archaeology is normal, but so we use the metric system. So 1 meter by 1 meter. But with a survey permit, you can only use itty bitty little tiny units, which are 1/2 meter by 1/2 meter, which is roughly this big. And so when you think of this expansive land and getting to excavate this small, it's challenging. And it's challenging to have so many people, excavating in that small space. So that was a challenge. You also could only excavate 10% of the site area. And that is really crucial and important. I'm kind of glad this happened so volunteers could understand the importance of that, because we only excavate a small portion of a site so that we leave more for future archaeologists, future projects, because technology is only advancing. We're leaving things for LiDAR, we're leaving things for future technology that won't be so, not aggressive, but so invasive, so damaging. Excavation is damaging. You lose that data as soon as your trowel hits the ground. So only excavating small parts of it is really critical to saving information for the future. and not creating too much of damage. So as we excavated, the graduate students, the field crew chiefs would float around to help everybody. I also required all participants to do site documentation and the lab portion. Site documentation paperwork, as with most shows, there's always a joke of oh, that's so much paperwork. It's true. And so I required all of the volunteers to fill out paperwork, and lots and lots and lots of it. And the reason this was critical was, one, they were the ones digging, so they should be reporting on what they felt, what they saw, what they experienced. If they had a change in the soil, or if they found 4 ceramic sherds, they could be the ones writing that down. But also because that's so important to archaeology, is writing down what we're doing. Like I said, once you dig, that information is gone. And so taking those pictures, drawing those maps, writing down what you saw is so important. And so they really got to see how much work and thought and documentation goes into this process. So now we are going to move on to results. How did this work out? What did we find? So the first thing is that volunteers were able to practice archaeological methodologies in a way that was respectful and knowledgeable. And the way that I kind of assessed that is when visitors would come up, visitors to Coronado Historic Site would come up to the excavation, they didn't immediately just be like, oh, Carly knows the answers to that, go ask her. They were like, hi, welcome to the excavation. We are doing this because we are trying to learn more information about what's out here before trails were built. This is really, and just kind of went on. And so that was such a good feeling, that they felt confident in their knowledge and their ability to not only learn more, but teach as well. When it comes to mapping, we recorded what are referred to as isolated occurrences. So it's like an artifact here, an artifact there. And we distinguished not just the one site that we thought we would, but actually 4 separate sites within that area. And so this map here, you can kind of see the purple is the railroad site. These are all kind of nicknames to help us distinguish them. The railroad site, yellow is the Hacienda site, which I'll talk about why those two are broken apart. The early site, and then the ethnographic garden site as well. And we'll talk about those, don't worry. But here is a huge distinguishing factor, is after we analyzed the artifacts, after we took pictures, measurements, tallies, that kind of thing, we saw a very clear distinction between the historic metal artifacts, which you can see in the purple there. 97% of the artifacts found in there were historic. And then versus the Hacienda site, which was 93% lithics and ceramics, which is, again, like the rocks that are human modified, as well as ceramic pieces, sherds. So 93% of that was this instead of metal. So clearly, there are 2 different time periods, and they should have been separated out. People learned how to map. So here are some of the volunteers' maps, which was kind of a fun experience. We used compass and paste methods. So you get a compass and you measure things, measuring tapes, and you draw it on the map. It really helps with spatial awareness, and just, again, appreciating how much work goes into an archaeological project. And then on the right here, we have profile maps. So looking at that vertical wall stratigraphy. And so the results is, if you see that white boundary, that is the boundary of the area was surveyed. And that is 44,819 meters squared. So a pretty good chunk of land for our project. The purpose is here. We identified the 4 sites. We recorded 71 isolated artifacts. That does not include the artifacts within the sites. And dispersing the crew chiefs among the volunteers was a super successful way of being able to answer questions and ensure quality. A lot of archaeologists are worried about the work that volunteers do, but doing things like this and really taking the time to train addresses some of those concerns. And honestly, that's what we do on field school, you guys. When we first learned how to do archaeology, at least with mine, you're kind of thrown out there to learn. And that's exactly the same here, as you learn on the job. And hopefully you have really good teachers that can help. So the results of the site boundaries and infield analysis, we use those two different flag colors to visually separate those things, and that's how we were originally able to tell the historic concentration versus prehistoric, as we saw the two different flag colors, and we're like, okay, something's going on here. We did find those sites here, the measurements on the right of just kind of how big they are, the different sizes. And we ended up breaking the original site 50230 into two sites. Again, that historic railroad site versus the Hacienda site, into two. And so the reason we called it the Hacienda site is, if you saw on the last slide, 93% of the artifacts were ceramics and lithics. And so we thought that that area had more of a potential to have the Hacienda than the later occupation. And so here are just some of the artifacts we found. We did find Mahoyaka, which is a ceramic here on the top left. We found this really weird can that had punctures in it. I would love if you guys put in the comments what you think that can was used for. I think that's a real fun question to ask people. So just imagine a normal like tin can, but with all those punctures in it. Why did somebody do that? Please answer. Ceramics, and the red piece that are in my fingers, that is a piece of a spindle whorl, which would originally be a circle. And then there in the bottom right, we have the base of a projectile point. Not diagnostic. In my understanding is we can't really learn much about it, but there it is. So we ended up excavating 6 units in the Hacienda site and 2 in each of the rest. And so the graduate students were interspersed within the crew. They were available for questions. They were there to see how things are going. And I wanted the crew to decide where to put the units. I wanted them to decide based on what they've learned so far where to excavate. And so that was awesome to see that these people used so many forms of knowledge to really figure out where to dig. It was either based on surface artifacts or, well, we have 3 down here, why don't we put 1 on this landform, that type of thing. So just seeing that was so inspiring. And let's see, and then of course the crew chiefs and I all agreed on that placement, but really it was led by the volunteers, which is super cool. Documentation ended up being substantial, to help me create the official state site forms for each site, or will once I get to it. Matt Barber, if you're watching this, I promise I'm working on it. So we were able to address the archaeological goals. We were able to document things just fine in this situation. And so here I wanted to show some pictures. Again, sorry with my floating face here. But, excavating through time, because you got to experience a lot of things. So we had the early site, which was mostly prehistoric ceramics, lithics. We had that base of the projectile point there. Lots of river cobbles. If any of my crew is watching this, I am so sorry for the river cobbles. That was tough to excavate through. We have the Hacienda site. And so this is super cool. One of the most awesome things that came out of this was, again, we just kind of placed those teeny tiny units, not randomly, but based on, what they decided. And one unit happened to fall right on top of almost an entire pot. And so all of these, tannish pieces were all from one square. That is like a needle in a haystack, right? That tiny square, like plopping right on top. And so we learned that, yes, there is stuff under the surface. There are things below that maybe could suggest that a hacienda was there. And again, that spindle whorl fragment, that Mahoyaka there, were found as well. We had the railroad site, and so you can see a really stark distinction in the artifacts here. We had the metal cans, part of a blade. We had a railroad spike, you know, a little screw there, bullet casing, and all kinds of like metal, you know, wiring, that kind of thing. And so that's why we refer to it as the railroad site. It was all of those metal artifacts. And then the ethnographic garden site. And so the ethnographic gardens, if you look at this aerial photo and this black horizontal line that's about you know, a third of the way from the bottom, that used to be an entire adobe wall that crossed through Coronado, and has since melted. This side on the, I guess it would be the east, but on the left side of the photo, is gone. You know, erosion, because the river is right there. And so that part of the wall is like completely gone. So we threw a couple units in here to learn more about it, see how that wall was constructed. And so here you can see this base of river cobbles, and on top of it were the adobe, I'm going to forget the word, but layers of adobe that were used. And my favorite slide, archaeology yoga. So you get to really learn creative ways of excavating in these tiny holes, especially with multiple people. I hope it's not freaking you guys out to see people so close together without masks. This was in 2019. You know, so everybody's real close together, getting friendly, making good friends, and excavating these in what I like to call archaeology yoga. So now the discussion, and I want to make this pretty quick so we have time for questions. But basically it comes down to, with proper training, guidance, and understanding, amateur volunteer archaeologists can contribute to archaeological endeavors, and their lives can also be enriched by these experiences. And this project demonstrated that. So many people afterwards, you know, spoke about how awesome it is to be able to recognize artifacts on the surface. And with that understanding of the laws involved, with the protection of cultural resources, it was really just an excitement, a new skill that they developed. And so, you know, next time you are out camping and want to dig, or you want to construct a fire ring, you'd be like, actually, there's archaeology here. Let's move to a different site and not damage it. And so those skills are really useful in protecting archaeology as well. And so this was, you know, an ongoing experience. You know, wasn't just the people who dug or were out there with me every day, but also you guys who get to experience this knowledge, experience this kind of projects, and hopefully we'll have more in the future that you can actually participate in. So this project really reached a lot of different people. And of course, future research is really important. Proper orientation, training, and availability for questions can ease archaeologists' concern about if things are getting done right, or you know, getting enough data potential, getting all that stuff. So if you're there to help, to guide, to teach, it's much like field school. It's how we all learned, and so that's critical. You know, for mapping, separating the Hacienda site and the railroad site allowed us to narrow down where the Hacienda could be located, but it also narrowed down the area that was available for us to excavate with the tiny units. So there's some pluses and minuses there. Reading a map using GPSs translate to other aspects of life, you know, and can help in their volunteering as well. So if they're volunteering at Coronado Historic Site, you know, and they could use a GPS to record where they found an artifact, and the archaeologists could go back out, see what to do, that kind of thing. So those skills are useful outside also. For survey, again, volunteers appreciated how much Coronado Historic Site actually protects. You know, you can kind of be like, oh, there's kind of archaeology, whatever, but seeing firsthand how important it is to protect all of that is really important too. Again, like I said, it's an enriching experience to recognize the artifacts, and also understanding a less destructive way to document sites by learning how to survey. Plus, we had more eyes on the ground. That led to a way quicker survey. You covered a lot more area, which saves time, money. Some of those concerns that we had at the beginning there can really kind of be outweighed there, because we had so many volunteers that were excited and wanted to learn. And then graduate students gained experience towards permitting in the state. So that was beneficial to them as well. We had a better estimate on where to search for the Hacienda in future excavations. which is good. And graduate students gained experience explaining their specialties in a way that is understood by people and is engaging. Now, excavation, here's the cool thing. This is one of the first systematic testings of this area, even though Coronado Historic Site is the oldest historic site dating back to 1940. And so that was a cool thing for people to be a part of. Yes, the small size of the units were a limiting factor. The Hacienda could still be there, but is very disturbed by, an entire railroad being built on top of it. Volunteers were so careful. I don't know if I just got lucky with my good group or if it was kind of that new beginner fear of not wanting to mess up or whatever it is, but they put so much care and precision into everything that they did. And they worked so well together as a team. And so I think just establishing this environment where it is okay to ask questions, where you make it very safe for people, to discuss things is so important to establishing, to really leading towards a good volunteer project. Site documentation, they understood how much data is lost by digging without recording. They, gained improved observation skills, learned about site formation processes, how time changes things, how things go on top of one another, stratigraphy. And the lab is somewhere that people use so many of their outside skills. So Dawn, she was in the lab, and she had a lot more experience than I did ever being in the lab. And so she, as a volunteer, was able to really run things and teach others. And so I relied on her experience a lot. So thank you, Dawn, if you're watching. We had one of our volunteers with an author, and so she was very good at researching. And so she used these skills to research the historic bottles. And so plus, a lot of these people as volunteers already knew interpretation. They knew how to speak to the public, how to engage people. And I'm not going to lie to you, not a lot of maybe some, but not a lot of archaeologists have these skills. Oftentimes in archaeology, we're kind of out in the middle of nowhere, not around people. And so a lot of us don't have those engaging skills like these volunteers do. So they brought all of their outside knowledge. And the lab really helped bridge that divide. People got to see what was coming out of the ground, which was pretty cool. And in archaeology, we are always complaining about the backlog, but there are people with time and a desire to help. Like maybe, the documentation, the research part isn't like sexy a part of archaeology, but people want to do it. People love doing that. And the documentation, the research, the lab portions are so critical to what we do as archaeologists. And so people can help with that backlog, y'all. You just got to give a little training. So here we have a picture of the lab. We have some of our volunteers here talking to the public about what the project is, what came out of the ground. Oh my gosh, this is not what I wanted. There we go, which is really cool. And so the visitors got to see this happening in front of them. And so visitors, the public don't often get to see the lab portion. That's pretty secluded. And so this was open for them to view, which is awesome. In conclusion, we made it, you guys. Thank you so much for sticking with me. In conclusion, can public archaeology projects safely contribute valid archaeological knowledge while simultaneously educating the public in an engaging way? Yes, 1,000 times yes, of course. Yes. Now more than ever, I believe in the importance of hands-on public archaeological projects. The public can provide valuable insights, expertise, and labor while enjoying the process of archaeology, while enjoying that whole thing that we did from start to finish. Time and money. This project only was a few weekends and a couple months, and sometimes never happened because of weather. So like money and time were not an issue. We got this much done, recorded all those artifacts, covered that much survey in just really a few days. So that's not too big of a concern in my eyes. Sensitive information, education, that is one of the ways that we combat those things. We educate about the importance of these sites to living people today. We talk about those connections. And let's see, and then they get to experience the care taken to document all of that stuff. They experience that firsthand, so they understand how much knowledge is lost. And then archaeological standards, easily met. I will easily be able to do this report based off of the information that the volunteers gathered. So we did not find the hacienda, but as they like to say, it's not about, you know, the end result. It's about the friends you make along the way. But really, we did find so much more, and we still did contribute a lot of archaeological knowledge. All of this will still be in reports. It will still be published so that future projects can take place. So collaborative projects like Dig Historia offer potential solution in addressing many of the problems that have plagued archaeology, such as correcting the misconceptions about archaeology, encouraging stewardship of archaeological resources, improving the relationship between archaeologists and stakeholders, and so much more. Looking forward, we got to analyze those artifacts. I need to figure out how to add quantifiable metrics to measure the success of these projects. So what can we use? What statistics can we use to show that these are really beneficial? Need to finish writing the survey report, submit to the state. Got to submit all the spatial data to NIMCRIS, which is that online database, and do more public archaeology and historic sites. Like I said, I now work at Los Suceros, and so hopefully we can do some of this here. So lots of work to still be done. You know, COVID definitely didn't help things with this project, and so got to get back at it as soon as it's safe to. So that, you guys, is my presentation. There's a huge list of people to thank, everybody involved. Catherine Peck, she did the GIS maps for me, which was incredible. Of course, the crew chiefs, Kathy, Josh, Abby, Dawn, who was in the lab, funding, of course, Center for Regional Studies, Department of Anthropology, graduate, Dr. Hannah Matson helped us with a lot of the supplies. Dr. Emily Jones, Dr. Bruce Huckle, and Angeline Bass were all on my master's committee. So, and of course, Ethan Ortega and Matt Barber and New Mexico Historic Sites. Lots of people to thank. So there you have it. I'm going to see now if we have any questions to answer in the chats. And if I don't get to yours, I will be sure to comment and answer there. So I'm going to try and check to see if we have questions. Okay, so Sally, you said, will there be additional opportunities in the future to volunteer? I certainly hope so. You know, I definitely the Los Suceros Historic Site, me and the manager, Ethan Ortega, are very passionate about public archaeology. Both of us, you know, the project at Jemez was really his project for his master's. And so both of us are super enthusiastic and want to continue this on. So I think it's 2023 we're going to have the project. Ethan, sorry if I get that wrong. But, you know, we'll keep you guys updated as things progress. But we would love to do more. And I think that's all the questions, at least I can see here. But please, again, if you see this, add them to the comments. I'll comment back. And thank you all so much for your time. Have a great night.